This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you on this horrible sunny Wednesday evening?
I thought you'd be quite happy, Kevin, because by the time this show goes out, we're less than 6 months until Christmas.
We've broken the back, exactly how it is, broken the back day. Saturday was always a good night because it was the longest night, and I was up last night going, yeah, it's 30 seconds less light than the night before. This is good. We're on the slippery slope. You look cheerful as ever, Kieran. I'll admit I'm a bit harassed. We've got a slightly leaky valve in the toilet system, which I've been trying to deal with in the age-old bloke way of staring at it and going, which, as I just said to Ali, has already saved us £100 because that's exactly what a plumber would have done for the first 2 minutes, stared at it and going, So the next thing is to wander down to our local plumbing shop and pretend that I'm a South London geezer and I just need a couple of parts. I believe you're not far, Keir. You're in South London, I believe, this lovely evening.
I am, yes. I'm in Greenwich tonight,
very nice.
South of the river. Always good as a Bermondsey boy to be on the right side of the Big Smoky.
Yeah, I think it's the Big Smoke here, isn't it, rather than the Big Smoky?
Yes.
We've got some big news stories, Kieran, and we'll start with John Textor. And as Oscar Wilde famously said, to lose one team from a top 5 European league may be considered misfortune. To lose two begins to look like carelessness, and that's exactly what's happened. He's sold his shares in Crystal Palace, and his French club Lyon have been relegated to League Two. So let's deal with Palace first, Kieran. That's seemed to come very quickly, very suddenly, which has fed into conspiracy theories that he needed the money desperately to fend off the French authorities, and it still didn't work. So just on the Palace story, Kieran, do we know who instigated the sale? Do we know whether this came from Steve Parish, who wanted Woody Johnson to buy into the club, or was it a desperate attempt by Textor to raise some cash at the last minute?
I think there's an element of both of those issues. John Textor has not received £180 million from Woody Johnson, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is that the deal still has to be ratified by the Premier League. And as we know, the owners and directors test does take time to complete. We've not seen any evidence from the Premier League that they've approved the deal. I've seen that the tweets from Palace itself. So clearly the deal has been agreed in principle, but you then have to go through due process. So I think it's the start of wheels in motion. It's clearly better for all parties. Textor is a classic case of a man who speaks first and thinks far, far later. His pronouncements towards Everton when he was still a part owner of Crystal Palace, I personally thought, and I'm not saying this because of Everton or Palace, were embarrassing and unprofessional. You don't, when you're owning one club, start making eyes at somebody else. I think that was ridiculous behaviour. He has I think a $1 million fine or something similar to that from his activities in South America for the accusations that referees were corrupt. And again, you might not like referees, you might disagree with their decisions, but, and perhaps this is reflective of broader issues in society today, with power comes responsibility. And no matter who you are, if you're in a position of power, you should hold the office and try to behave in a professional manner. The South American authorities weren't impressed by him. So the deal with Woody Johnson, he's doubled his money, by the looks of it. And also it values Palace at around about 400, 450, which was probably the figures that we've been looking at. Yeah, that's almost twice the value of Chelsea's women's team.
We're doing well. Interesting, Kieran. That for the first time I can remember, all the news stories say the Woody Johnson, not takeover, but his share of the club has to be approved by the Premier League and the Women's Super League, which I don't recall that ever being an issue before. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I mean, we do now have the new co, and we do have this sort of this breakaway sort of independent body of the FA and so on. It will not be an issue as far as you're acquiring 45% of presumably Palace Holdco, and Palace Holdco, of course, are the parent company of both Crystal Palace men's team and Crystal Palace women's team. So I don't see that as being an issue. For Palace fans, this is money going from Woody Johnson to John Textor, and none of this is going to flow through to the club. You then have to ask, what's in it for Woody Johnson? Because one of Textor's ongoing whinges was that he had a significant investment but wasn't able to get things done at Palace. Well, Woody Johnson appears to have inherited that environment, unless he's now going to act in concert with Donner and Blitzen in terms of having the three shareholders, which, like, if they act in concert, they can outvote Steve Parish. But they've not shown any inclination to do that historically. So trying to work out his behaviour there is strange. And then, of course, we've got the separate issue of John Textor, and if the reports are correct that he was effectively kicked out or wasn't allowed to attend the meeting which was being held by the French authorities, and he's come out, or the club has come out, but we know who's effectively behind the wheel of this, with a sort of very bombastic appeal in terms of what's happened at Lyon. It's got to be good news for Crystal Palace, because if they have been relegated, then if you're comparing the two positions, being relegated surely has to be lower than the league position that Crystal Palace had.
Yeah, well, cup. Yeah, well, so you'd presume us winning the cup would now trump their league position, which is relegated. I mean, L'Equipe reporting this afternoon that UEFA is talking to Textor tomorrow and may allow them to stay in the Europa League subject to sanctions, which I presume means some kind of financial deposit. I don't know. I'm unlike most Palace fans, I'm trying not to speculate until it all happens. Just back to Palace though, Kieran. The Athletic are reporting that they're fairly certain Woody Johnson will allow the club to be run the way it has continued to be run. Which they seem to be basing on the fact that he kind of got a slap on the wrist from the NFL, because when it came to end of season approval ratings, he was quite a way down the list for the way New York Jets were run. He tended to interfere in that process. He allowed his teenage children to make decisions. The players didn't seem to like him, so it seems maybe he's learnt that lesson. But I presume that whoever's instigated him buying the shares from Textor, Steve Parish and Donovan Blitzen would have had to approve it, would they? Or would is this a transaction that they would have had no say in whatsoever?
Well, it's a private company. There could be what we sometimes refer to as preemption rights, which means that quite often what you see in companies is that if a significant shareholder is about to make a sale, that could be matched by the other significant shareholders if they match the price. Clearly, they've chosen not to do so, or it could be that clause doesn't exist. So they don't have to approve the deal, but in a bit of a similar way, that by all accounts, if somebody comes in at Manchester United and offers the Glazers money for their shares, if Offshore Jim matches that price, then he can buy the shares as an alternative. So there are normally complicated elements of small print, but there doesn't appear to be any desire from the existing three directors of Crystal Palace to buy out. Because let's face it, if they'd been interested in doing that, they would have already done that.
Yeah. Well, because the rumor was that Textor approached Harrison Blitzer first to see if they would buy out his shares. But it does seem, Kieran, we've talked about John Textor spinning plates before, but it does seem like that Leon is his biggest plate. It seems to an outsider that everything he does is an attempt to keep Leon solvent. He's taking money away from wherever he can to keep Leon in the French league, and that hasn't worked. I mean, what does it say about the value of Leon if the relegation is ratified?
Yeah, I think the price that he's looking for Leon, he's not going to get. The French TV deal is an absolute car crash, and that's for Ligue 1. French lower leagues, the money there is buttons. One of he's got South American clubs who qualified for the Club World Cup, which will help him, and I think one of them's now through to the last 16. So that is a positive, but those types of sums are chicken feed. He does appear to have got in above his head to a certain extent, and I'm not likening him to what's happened at 777, but we have seen MCOs before, such as 777, get into a mess, and when things start to unravel, they unravel very, very fast.
And he got into a public fight, Kieran, with the boss of PSG and the French league, both of whom he accused of being part to that disastrous French TV deal. That can't have helped him either, can it?
But yeah, he's no diplomat, and sometimes you've got to say things in private and keep them private. He does like the sound of his own voice, and I don't think that's necessarily been of benefit to him.
You know, producer guy is going to be editing this going, yes, sometimes things should be kept in private. You're absolutely right. And yes, one of you does like the sound of their own voice. So he'll be telling us we're hypocrites again, Kieran. Just finally, there is another English team potentially involved in this. I don't know whether fans and two tabloid journalists at least are putting two and two together and making five here, but there's already talk that John Textor may make an outright bid to buy Sheffield Wednesday. It does seem clear that he wants an English club to own, all of his own, that he can cuddle and stroke and take to bed with him. And I don't know whether it's just because Sheffield Wednesday are an English club that are available. We can certainly afford it, given the money that we think he's probably got from Johnson. Is there anything you've heard that makes you think that could be a possible situation?
Yeah, the horses or the dogs are running on this one. That's for sure. Chancery is in a financial pickle. He's asking too much for Sheffield Wednesday. John Textor potentially is going to have money burning in his pocket. He wants to make a name for himself in English football because he wants to make a name for himself, full stop. And if it works, then be very successful. If I was a Sheffield Wednesday fan, he wouldn't be top of my list.
Yeah. Talking of multi-club ownership, Kieran, the EFL has announced what seems like a quite drastic change in position.
Yes, there was a meeting of club owners, and the EFL has regular meetings, and it looks like the EFL constitution has been adjusted because until fairly recently, if you wanted to be part of an MCO, it was okay, and this seems a strange thing. It was okay to own clubs on the continent, but it wasn't okay to own clubs in the Scottish and Irish leagues. And I think the promotion of Leeds United from the EFL Championship to the Premier League effectively saved the EFL from having to make an awkward decision, because that would have appeared to have been some overlap, although what I understand is that Andrew Kavanagh is now the majority owner, or has the biggest stake, shall I say, in Leeds United, and the San Francisco 49ers investments with Parag are sort of minority shareholders there. But this does allow a broader portfolio to be acquired. This, I think, is to be welcomed. I don't see potential. I don't see conflicts of interest between English and Scottish clubs. Nobody cares if the Anglo-Scottish Cup was resurrected, and people were saying, "Whoa, yeah, what happens if an English club and a Scottish club who were both owned by?" Nobody gives a damn. So I think this is a positive, and to me, it's always been a historical anomaly.
I suppose there is one potential problem if a Championship club were to win the FA Cup, but that's a very unlikely scenario. There is a question, though, Kieran, that is slightly difficult for you to answer, but let's just say I'm asking for 26,000 friends. If Brighton were to be relegated, would that mean that Tony Bloom would then be able to buy the whole of Hearts rather than 29% of Hearts like he has done now then?
I think, because remember, Brighton are in the Premier League at present, he could have bought a voting share in Hearts. The reason why he's bought a non-voting share is because of the experience that he had at USG in Belgium, where he had to make a divestment. He's trying to future-proof things. What happens if both Brighton and Hearts ended up in the Europa League in a season or two? Then he'd have to make a divestment. So by having non-voting shares, he doesn't have influence or control, and he's doing this through Jamestown Analytics, where I think the aim is to be a fly in the ointment of the two big Glasgow clubs.
We'll be talking about the Rangers lead situation a little bit more later, Kieran, but in the meantime, another of the promoted teams, Burnley, looking to make some quick cash.
Yes, so this is the Burnley owners ALK, and it has to be remembered that they acquired Burnley through what we refer to as a leverage buyout, which is the same mechanism that was used by the Glazer family to acquire Manchester United, where you effectively borrow money, or you get the football club to borrow money to buy the shares in other clubs, and then on the basis of that, you pay the interest and you hope that the club's successful. But it looks as if they're going to do a round of pitching to get a fund to extend Burnley into an MCO, and on the basis of that, try to get the benefits for a project which nobody's ever managed to give me any indication as to what are the benefits of an MCO. In practice, in theory, I teach at management school. I can give you all the theoretical knowledge, synergies of revenue, synergies of cost, knowledge exchanges, transfer pricing, and so on. But show me an MCO which has genuinely been successful for more than one of the clubs. I struggle to find one yet. Red Bull, perhaps, but Red Bull are putting a huge amount of money. You look at the City Football Group, not really. It's Manchester City plus, it's sort of it's a tanker with a flotilla of tugboats.
Yeah, it's now even Red Bull. You can see why they did it in the first place. It's a sort of almost, you can't be almost unique, can you? But it is an almost unique situation that Red Bull taking an existing sort of, I mean, 5th or 6th division team and changing their name. I mean, it was literally an extended advert for the product initially, and it's kind of got out of hand a little bit.
That's right, and that actually takes us back to John Textor, who has tried to change the name of his Belgian club.
Oh my God.
And if he thought he was unpopular at Palace and Lyon, well, back at Belgium, they absolutely loathe him, and they told him in no uncertain terms to go boil his brains.
There's a massive demonstration against him in Brussels yesterday. Kieran, I will give you the pleasure of letting our listeners know what name he wants to give to this team. It's Daring Brussels.
Daring, yeah, good grief. It's just embarrassing.
Daring, I mean, it's like your gran at Christmas, isn't it? I wouldn't gran if I was you, but no, it's Daring Brussels. I mean, but again, it's an indication of how these people just don't do their research into. Has he not looked at Cardiff to see what happened there when he tried to change the kit to red? Football fans love the money that these people bring in, but you muck about with their cherished traditions at your own risk.
I don't think John Textor, and I don't want to ever go at the guy, I don't think he's ever taken other people's views into account other than his own.
Yeah, I will say though, Kieran, and I've been asked to say this by several people from 5-year plan, the Palace Pod, that not long after he took over, when we were doing the marathon march, he gave us a spectacularly generous donation. I mean, spectacularly generous, accompanied by a really lovely note. So it started well, and by what I can gather, he's actually a genial, affable fella. He's just found himself in a situation where someone like Woody Johnson comes along, who's properly rich, I believe, heir to the Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical company. So we're in a situation in world football now where very rich people are finding themselves up against very, very, very rich people.
Yeah, and that benchmark of wealth which is required is forever changing.
Yeah.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
Strange times for Brentford fans, Kieran. Strange times for me, I have to say, because it seems that their new manager is going to be Keith Andrews. And the reason that's strange for me is that Ali's best friend from school is called Keith Andrews. And I love Keith to bits, but I wouldn't let him anywhere near a football team, to be perfectly honest. So I keep wanting to get in touch with him, saying, you have got the right one, haven't you? You definitely got the right Keith Andrews. But they're looking for more investment in the club from new people.
Yes, and I think it's fair to Matthew Benham. Again, we've spoken about the level of wealth within the Premier League. Matthew Benham, with smart odds, has been spectacularly successful. But I think he's felt that he's taken the club as far as he can go in terms of pouring money into the club, and he's looking for minority investment. So he's in talks with a guy called Gary Lubner and a filmmaker called Matthew Vaughan. And it looks like Lubner, he was associated, I think he used to be the guy that used to own Autoglass. And Vaughan, he made Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
Oh, did he?
Yes. So, and Layer Cake. So he's clearly an element of geezerdom attached to him. But he has been successful, and he's also known as Mr. Claudia Schiffer.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, it's a tough life, Kieran, isn't it?
I know. Yeah. So I think they are looking for a minority stake, 15-20%, to presumably to provide some more working capital. I've said on more than one occasion, in my view, that Brentford are probably the best run club. They are super smart, and I don't say that through gritted teeth as I'm a Brighton fan or anything like that. It's a pure objective piece of analysis. They have punched above their weight spectacularly since first joining the Premier League a few seasons ago. But I think Matthew Benham has got many things to do, and he's looking to share the load.
I apologise, Kieran. The reason I started chuckling halfway through your answer is that Ali came into the room and slapped a piece of paper down in front of me to say, "Keith is brilliant at football!" ! And then turned on the heels, and I can only describe it as flounced out. So basically, it's flounced out. So I'm happy for the record to say Keith is brilliant at football. I still wouldn't let him in charge of my club, to be perfectly honest, much as I love him. Talking of Matthew Vaughan here, I can't let this pass. What 5 days of cricket we had. Astonishing, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. But both sides.
Oh.
When the number of times when I was on my WhatsApp group with my mates saying, "Our India have really got us over the barrel now," and England came back. And it's got. I've never seen such rabbit pie since the miraculous recovery of the Prowler's hamstring on what was some fairly flat wickets when sides have suddenly gone 5 down, and he knows that number 7 onwards are a bit bobbins. It was like watching Jesus Christ himself make a recovery in terms of healing. You sure you're okay to bowl, Prowler? Yeah. I'll put me down for 3 or 4 overs. I'll come back now. Of a man that was very, very preoccupied with his average.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our first innings, our last two, just watching him as Bumrah turns around for his... It's a really short one up for an incredibly fast bowler, but you can just see the look in her eyes go, we ain't going to be here for long. We ain't doing it. But I'll say it again, 2020, fine, 100, whatever, one day cricket, great. Test cricket, it's
wonderful.
It's fantastic. Rangers and Leeds, Kieran, Rangers have secured additional investment after their takeover. Very keen to reassure Rangers fans yesterday that they will not be a feeder club for Leeds United. At the same time as the Leeds United ownership were very keen to tell their fans they won't be a feeder club for Rangers. This expression, closed loop, was used, by which I take it they intend to run both clubs separately. Would that be right, Kieran?
Yes. And they're both big enough clubs to be independent of one another. There is commonality in the sense that 49ers Investments do have a stake in Rangers, but Andrew Kavanagh, he was at the extraordinary general meeting that took place at Rangers last week, and there were sort of 2 main votes. First of all, were the shareholders willing to accept the £20 million effectively of fresh shares, which is good. It's shares rather than loans, which is something which, on the price of football, we're always in favour of because there's no obligation to repay. And that went through. I think some Rangers fans have been, I wouldn't say sniffy, but going, well, it's only 20 million quid, but I think this is where the new owners have come in, and I think they've played quite a good game. They said, we're not saying that the £20 million is all we're willing to invest, and we're not saying that £20 million is not what we're all willing to invest. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to reveal our cards. We're going to keep them close to our chest. That money has to be spent well, because Rangers have got the same wage bill as Celtic. Rangers have got the same cost of squad in terms of the cost of buying players as Celtic. The difference is that Celtic make 300 grand a week in profit, and Rangers lose 300 grand a week, and that cannot continue. So Rangers have got to spend this money well, and I know this is something which is in very short supply in Glasgow. Rangers fans, I think they've got to go and say, right, this is a horrible work. This is a project. This is going to take a long time. We're going to have to be patient, and patience is of course difficult as a football fan. The other issue that was voted on at the EGM, is my understanding, is that Rangers is no longer going to be a PLC. It instead is going to be a private company. It was effectively a private company, but it had some of the baggage of a PLC. So I think this is a logical thing to do. If you want to, if you are a shareholder in Rangers, you can still use, I think it's Tifosis, to sell your shares on sort of on a private deal with somebody else. So again, I think that's just sort of good paperwork, good administration. Patrick Stewart, who is the new chief exec, I was very impressed by him when he was at Old Trafford, and the voices I heard at Old Trafford. He was well thought of there. So I think they've got a safe pair of hands. Is a safe pair of hands what you need in Glasgow football? Well, they've had a safe pair of hands at Celtic for years, and they've not done too bad. But as we know, it can be a bit excitable there.
I have to say though, Kieran, talking to a friend of mine who's a Rangers season ticket holder, and I won't tell you his name because he sort of has a position of some influence in Scottish cultural society, if you like, Kieran. But he was saying that already he thinks the new owners are doing a much better job in terms of communication and PR than the old ones ever did. He said if it carries on like this, they're much clearer in stating their intent and trying to include fans, which is a step in the right direction. And I know fans are easily fooled sometimes, but he seems to think, as he's an intelligent chap, that these people are cut from a different cloth.
Yeah, and again, without giving too much away, I was invited to a Zoom conversation with two members of the board of Rangers Football Club to talk about the changes, to talk about the ambitions. And I'm not saying this because I was flattered at being invited, because I do try to be objective. What impressed me was they were talking adult language. And sometimes being an adult in a room at football is something which we assume is always the case, but I can assure you that it's not. We've only got to see the behaviour of some club owners, and you go, well, that's not particularly becoming of a professional. But yes, I was impressed by the way that Rangers had fought this through. And now it's a case of buying the right players, and that's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's a funny expression, that, isn't it? Adult in the room. It came up in a conversation I had recently with Ali, who said at Ed's 5th birthday party, I wasn't the adult in the room then. I'll take that criticism on board, darling. As predicted by you, Kieran, the Premier League has written to Chelsea for some clarification.
Yes. As we know, Todd Bowley is an investor in Vivid Seats, which is a ticket reseller. Doesn't operate in the UK, but it does sell football tickets to American sports fans. And if you take a look at the small print of Chelsea's accounts, there appears to be a financial relationship between Vivid and Chelsea. And I don't think Vivid Seats are an approved ticket reseller. So trying to get to the bottom of this is useful. I think there's been quite a few emails flying between Chelsea and the Premier League because we had the issue with regards to the car park where Chelsea, I think they just accidentally overvalued the sale of the car parks by around about £6 million. There's ongoing issues, as we're aware, for the sale of the women's team. Though it was noticeable, I think, in the last few days that Richard Masters, the chief executive of the Premier League, has said Chelsea have done nothing wrong. It's perfectly legal. I was on a football finance quiz a week or so ago, and one of the questions was, what was the difference between the profits of Chelsea Football Club and the losses of the parent of Chelsea Football Club over a period of 12 months? And there were 4 options given. And I think the top figure was £468 million. And that proved to be the correct answer. And by all accounts, according to Richard Masters, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever, selling assets to yourself, because that's within the rules. And then he wonders why some people think, well, perhaps the rules aren't very good, and perhaps the Premier League ought to have some sort of external scrutiny if they're going to have rules which are frankly a joke, and also rules which would not be allowed under UEFA.
I was about to get a comedy cross there, Kieran, and demand to know which financial football quiz you were doing that you didn't ask me to be part of the team. And then, of course, I realised you were talking about our very own football finance quiz that we were doing this time last week. For those people who weren't at the quiz last week, Kieran, perhaps you could just briefly explain what's meant by the difference between the profit of the football club and the profit of the operating company.
Yeah, Chelsea FC Holdings, which is the football club which previously owned the women's team, it reported a profit of, I think it was around about 120, 130 million pounds. Part of that was due to the sale of players. Chelsea, I've always praised Chelsea for their ability to monetize players from a purely business point of view. Yeah, from a human point of view, there's a separate discussion to be had. And then you've got another company called Blueco 22, and Blueco 22 owns Chelsea FC Holdings. It now owns Chelsea Women's Football Club separately, and it also owns Strasbourg. But I'm pretty certain, and Chelsea FC, Blueco 22 lost over £250 million in 2024 in the same season that Chelsea made this big profit. And I was just pointing out that seems to be a bit of an anomaly, but according to Richard Masters, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I'm not trying to score points here, and I'm not trying to have a gig at Masters or the Premier League. The rules in their current form are not fit for purpose, and therefore, if you're just going to pay lip service for rules, then that's not fair on the likes of Everton, Nottingham Forest, who have had to suffer points deductions because they've ended up being caught out by a set of rules which are frankly worthless.
That did sound like a bit of a dig, to which I can only say, well done. I'm trying to give, despite your misgivings, Kieran, I'm trying to give the Club World Cup the benefit of the doubt, but I'm afraid one of the very many things in the column is the Juventus kit, which is horrendous. Really, it's a crime against fashion and football and history. And yet it doesn't seem to have stopped them signing a fairly long partnership with the people that supplied it.
Yes. This has been trumpeted in one way. I think it's over 400 million euros.
Wow.
Over 10 years. But that's going to take us through to 2035.
This is with Adidas, we should say.
This is with Juventus and Adidas. And that's taking over from another deal for exactly the same amount of money, which only covered 8 years. You go, well, hold on. 400 divided by 8 is £50 million a year. 400 divided by 10 is only £40 million a year, or €40 million a year. And also, a euro in 2035 is going to be worth considerably less than a euro in 2017 when the deal was first signed because of inflation. So I think this is a reflection of two things. First of all, Juventus are not the biggest dog necessarily in Italian football. And what's happening in Italian football, I think, is absolutely brilliant. Napoli winning it last year.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely made up for Scott McTominay, because anybody who knows Scott, he's just a really good kid. And he was magnificent. Delighted for him. Delighted for Billy Gilmore as well.
Yeah.
And what we've seen happen at Napoli, and also whilst he was a complete barn pot, Maradona and Napoli was that. Why I think Maradona is probably the greatest footballer of my lifetime is simply because he was a one-man team, and he did that for Argentina, and he effectively did that as well. He one or two down points as well, but we'll deal with those separately. So yes, it is a lucrative deal by Italian standards, but it's way behind that of Manchester United, who have a 900 million sterling deal with Adidas. So that's more than €1 billion over the same period. We've seen Adidas taking over at Anfield. That deal is worth considerably more than the one being signed by Juventus. And I think that is reflective of the dominance of the Premier League in terms of globalization and popularity in international markets.
You talked about Lisbon and Ronaldo the other day. When you go to Naples, which is an incredible, hectic, volatile, beautiful, exciting city, but everywhere you go, on every corner, it's either the Virgin Mary or it's Maradona or it's both. Or
Yes.
I've got a photograph somewhere of a giant Virgin Mary statue in an Argentina shirt, which is they adore Maradona there. I mean, you can't, and you just can't watch the documentaries about you. And that's the hard thing. Watch the clips of him playing football. That's great. Just try not to watch the documentaries about him, because they break your heart. What he was turned into by various things and people. But I mean, it's just incredible the power of football in a place like Naples, where all their problems were pushed to one side when this little 5'8" firebrand came in and turned the city on its head. And it's incredible that they still remember him and revere him so much.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by The Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at Polestar.com.
Now, Kieran, we've waited a long time to say this, but finally, the Premier League, after months, years of deliberation, have reached a decision about the long-running Manchester City saga and their kickoff times. Finally.
Yes, well, the long-running issue has been the half-time breaks, which have gone beyond the limits. So Manchester City were charged by the Premier League for late kickoffs or late second halves, as far as last season was concerned. And I think the accusation is that Manchester City were seeking some form of on-field advantage by this. Why have the Premier League taken this action? Well, the Premier League have contracts with broadcasters, and those broadcasters say, you've worked in television and football yourself, that the kickoff must be at a very precise time because implications for adverts, implications for sponsors, and so on. And it looks like Manchester City have really got up the noses of the Premier League. Anybody that's ever heard Pep talk know that he's a very passionate guy. He wants to talk. He constantly wants to communicate to his players. So is this a deliberate policy, or is this just a byproduct of him wanting to continually get messages across to players? We don't know, and ultimately I don't particularly care, but it does show that the Premier League can make decisions in relation to Manchester City and successfully have a sanction against them. If they end up with a £1 million fine for the 115 charges, I suspect there will be slightly more observation and comment about it.
Yeah. And my guess is that Man City probably won't be going to CAS over this Friday. Right, yes. We've got two stories to end which are about fans in one way or another. But before that, Kieran, the last football story, it says here, and this is, I mean, it's taken nearly 6 years, but according to this story, there's only one team left on your naughty step.
Well, this is my, I have a fondness for Company's House, and I have a fondness. I'm a completist. And that's a byproduct of having an OCD personality, which has positives and negatives. The negatives, mainly, which are often said to be by the Baroness, pointing out my shortcomings. But football clubs under Company's legislation have 9 months in which they can submit their accounts. 91 clubs out of 92 have now submitted their 2024 accounts, and there is one club which has chosen not to do so. They have utilised a loophole which they are entitled to use. Whether they're entitled to use that from a moral or ethical standpoint, at the same time, they are asking season ticket holders to renew their season tickets in good faith and not willing to share their finances. It's a separate issue. Yeah, but that team is MK Dons. They should submit their accounts. Based on my figures, they have to submit them by the 30th of June. So I've only got a week to wait. If they don't submit them by the 30th of June, I will go full throttle on social media and remind them every single day that they're late submitting their accounts, which officially have to be in by that date. There's no excuse for it. They have submitted them to HMRC. They have submitted them to the EFL for the equivalent of PSR purposes. So why they're just thumbing their nose at fans and people who care about Milton Keynes? I'm not a Milton Keynes Dons fans, but I think their fans are entitled to know the state of the club's finances. And given that they've got some new owners who have come in, it just seems to be a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, those new owners, Kieran, they don't know who they're messing with. They don't want Maguire going medieval on their RC, do they? It's interesting, when we spoke to Mick Buckley, or rather when I spoke to Mick Buckley, the chair of the board at AFC Wimbledon, he said the circle will only be finally complete, the hurt will only be finally put away when AFC Wimbledon get to play MK Dons in the Championship. Because that's the Championship is where Wimbledon were when that shameful decision was made to allow them to be franchised out. And for all the things that have happened at AFC Wimbledon, and in the long run, I don't think any Wimbledon fan would have wanted to miss what's happened in the past 20 odd years. But he just said there will come a day when that'll be it. We can finally move on then, because we've got back to where we were when it all began. And it's things like that I think overseas owners will never quite understand as well. Now, Kieran, one of the things we've spoken about almost from the start of the pod is promotion from the National League, and now the Football Supporters Association have had a big say as well this week.
Yes, the FSA had their annual conference. There were a number of votes that were held, and I was hoping to attend, but unfortunately I couldn't because I was in Lisbon. But one of the things that they have backed, and I think this again is indicative of the differences between football fans and football club owners, is support for the National League's 3 Up, 3 Down campaign in terms of promotion and relegation to the EFL. Again, we are old enough to remember where it was all done in smoky rooms in terms of re-election. We then had 1 Up, 1 Down, which became 2 Up and 2 Down. But as we saw with last season, there's big gaps, and it does seem very harsh that the club finishing as runners-up in the National League doesn't get automatically promoted. So this is further weight. Will EFL clubs in League Two take any notice of this vote? 2 hopes, Bob and none, and Bob's not around. So why will League Two clubs take no notice? Because they are acting, as too often we see in football when it comes to club owners, with short-term self-interest at heart. If we got a 3 in 24 chance of going down compared to a 2 in 24 chance of going down, that's a 50% increase. We don't want to vote for that. What I would say to those club owners is look at the number of former EFL clubs who are now in the National League. If you do get relegated, it then becomes that much more difficult for you to return. So it could actually be in your longer term self-interest that you would vote for this. The National League is almost fully professional. There is a very good case for 3 Up, 3 Down because it seems absolutely crazy. You've got 4 clubs being promoted at the top of League Two. Why have you only got 2 being relegated out of the bottom?
Well, also, Kieran, we learnt, and I didn't know this, we learnt from a York City fan on our quiz last week that the playoff teams are not even seeded. You would assume that the team who finished second by quite some margin would then play the worst team left in the playoffs, but that's not the case.
Well, they are seeded and they aren't seeded in the sense that I think you have 3rd versus 6th and 4th versus 5th, and they go into matches and then they play the club that is second. So I think the club that finishes as runners-up does play fewer matches.
Right, okay.
And I think, but they can end up playing the team 3rd as opposed to the team 6th and so on. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But I personally would have more playoffs elsewhere in football because we both experienced the highs and lows of them, and they do keep the excitement going.
Well, they do, but I'd rather watch them from a distance than take part in them.
Yes.
It's easy for us who are inverted commas established Premier League clubs to go, yeah, aren't the playoffs exciting? But I know from experience being at the Sheffield United Sunderland game, they're not exciting for the poor bastards who lose it. Essentially, and they're brilliant. I tell you, we know who do love the broadcasters. Absolutely love them. They're fantastic for the broadcasters. But and if you were guaranteed to go up via the playoffs, of course you would choose to do so. If you knew you were going to win at Wembley, that's the route you would take. But the trouble is, you don't. This last story, Kieran, it's a lovely story, but it's made me slightly grumpy as somebody who just a few months ago did a 63-mile football-based charity walk. I'm not entirely sure I approve of this chap, Kieran.
We just like to highlight the work of Paul Venables, from Kidsgrove, who is walking from Glasgow and Celtic Park, where Lou Macari started his career. He's then walking to Old Trafford, and we're both old enough to remember Lou Macari playing with Manchester United. Was always a great player for us as well. And of course, he ended up at Stoke as manager. So he's going from Glasgow to Manchester, going to the Lou Macari's Chippy, and then going from Manchester to Stoke. And he's raising money for the Macari Foundation, the Davis Foundation, And Lou Macari, the work that he has done off field, and players don't get enough praise for this. Anybody that's seen the film Marvelous with Toby Jones about the guy who
Stoke City Kitman,
Stoke City Kitman, who was also a clown and also had some challenges himself. One of the most uplifting and heartwarming films you'll ever see. It is absolutely brilliant. So Paul is doing this, and if anybody wants to support him, I believe they can do so by going to a Just Giving page. So I thought we'd just like to highlight that and to wish Paul all the best in his walk, and also to say Lou Macari, just one of my old school footballing heroes.
I always, my views on Panini stickers, Kieran. In general, I think they're all right up until the age of 12, in which case you should be stepping away. But I do remember there's one. I always associate Lou Macari with one particular picture. That's him kneeling down, palm of the hand on the ball in the prescribed 1970s fashion, in that Man United kit with the white V-neck and the white collar.
Oh, yeah.
Which at the time I thought was a fancy kit.
Oh, yes. It was Admiral, wasn't it?
It was Admiral, I believe, yeah. He was a great player. Stoke City fans still speak very highly of him. So, yes, good luck to Paul. We might try and grab a 5-minute telephone interview with Paul on the way, in which I can give him some tips on blisters and toe care, which he can then laugh off because he's walking 5 times as much as I walked, basically. But so good luck to him. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and more. Just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show on our weekly Tuesday Questions Pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. You can follow us on X, Twitter, don't forget, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, guess where you go? The website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday on, as Dave Lee Travis used to say, the other side of the weekend. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thanks for everybody to being in contact. Get lots of DM messages, lots of gossip. We do read them all. We will reply as best we can, and there are sometimes circumstances for whatever reasons, when we can't say anymore. But thanks for keeping in touch and all the kind words as well. Look, times are tough for everybody, and thank you to everybody at the Price of Football Club. There's many people looking for subscriptions. We try to make your subscription as fun and as beneficial as possible. But if you don't feel you want to, or you don't feel you can afford, there's another way that you can support the Price of Football, and that's to give us a review. It helps us in terms of our profile with the podcast agencies and so on. When we're trying to get guests, they go on and they say baffling things, such as, why has somebody said they would rather the show be presented by Boris Karloff and Lou Macari? And I've got absolutely no idea, but they still come on the show, and therefore feel free to write it.
Well, here's a fun fact for you, Kieran. Elsa Lanchester, who played the wife of Frankenstein, as played by Boris Karloff, she was from Peckham.
Really?
Yeah, and she was a lifelong communist. So Hollywood in the late 40s and early 50s, not a particularly good place for her to be. And by all accounts, she had a spectacularly broad South London accent, which she managed to tame while Boris Karloff was going down on one knee to ask her to be the bride of Frankenstein. That's a sort of half-assed, not checked fact that you get when you listen to this pod, Kieran.
Brilliant.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.